Hey guys, so this is the second book review that I'm doing. It's the name of the book that I'm going to review is called Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, which is written by Jonathan Safran Foer. It was written, I believe, in 2005, and I think in 2011 it was made into a motion picture starring Tom Hanks and Sandra Bullock and some other pretty famous actors. So basically, what this book is about is it centers around the event of 9/11. Um, centers around this kid named Oscar, whose father died on 9/11. And he's sort of in this state of grief and sorrow and anger about what's happened. That's pretty clear right from the beginning of the book. So Oscar is the narrator of the book, and he's an eccentric character. Like, he's kind of this nerdy, quirky little kid, like 8 or 9 years old, I think. Has a chip on his shoulder, and he sort of reminds me of Holden Caulfield a little bit from The Catcher in the Rye. I think that archetype of a young kid who's sort of trying to orient himself in the world and has all these difficult emotions and challenges as he does that. I think it certainly had that. It sort of, like I said, it did kind of remind me of The Catcher in the Rye. I wouldn't be surprised if the author is a fan of that book. So the main storyline here is so the kid is in in his father's room one day, and he sees this vase, and he's like, "Whoa, wow, okay, I've never saw this before. I wonder, like, what is this thing? Like, what's the significance of this?" So he goes to grab the vase, but in doing so, he's kind of slips and falls, and he breaks it, and then he gets upset at himself for doing that. But then he finds this key inside the vase, and he's like, "Whoa, this key must be really important. There must be some special meaning behind the key that his father was intended for me to find out about." So the next day he goes to a locksmith, and then he's like, "Okay, can you explain what this key is?" And the locksmith kind of walks him through it a little bit, but he's like, "Well, I mean, this key, there's like millions of these things that this key could open. I can't really help you a whole lot." Then he finds that I believe inside the vase there was also an envelope, and it had the word black written on it, written in red ink. So then he goes to this art supply store, and he's like, "Hey, can you explain, like, is there anything significance to this, to the word black written here and in red ink and all that? Like, what's the meaning behind all this?" And she's like, "You know what? Usually when people write a color in letters, they use the same color ink as the word itself. So, like, if they were to write the word green, they would write it with green ink. Or if they were to write the word red, they would write it in red ink. Or if the word black, they would write it in black ink. In this case, it was written in red ink. And on top of that, the first letter was capitalized. So she told him that, it's probably not has anything to do with the color black. It actually has probably something to do with a person named Black. So then Oscar has this idea to basically visit every single person in the city of New York with the name Black and try to figure out if they know anything about this key or they knew his father and all that. And he does that every Saturday. And so a lot of the story is him doing that, and the adventures he gets into. Like, he meets this elderly man in his apartment building with the name Black, and he's this war correspondent. He's an interesting guy, and he sort of befriends Oscar and agrees to accompany him on all these adventures as he meets all the different people with the name Black throughout the city of New York. And so the second person he meets during this adventure was this elderly woman. She was in her middle-aged woman, like 48 years old, and she was kind of emotional. She was crying. She was in a state of distress, and Oscar was attracted to her. He was like, can I kiss you? 8, 9-year-old kid telling a 48-year-old woman, to kiss is a little weird, as you can imagine. And she's like, no, I don't think that's appropriate. And there was another man in the apartment who was her husband, but I think they had gotten into an argument with each other. So anyways, we find out towards the end of the book that she had left a message to Oscar saying, hey, I actually wasn't totally honest with you. Like, I actually do know something about this key, so just call me back. And that's when we find out actually that, because I think her mother had seen this message. That's where we find out actually that her mother probably, see the mother, actually when you read the book, you're like, you sort of find it weird that his mother would just allow this little kid to just go around the city of New York and meet like random strangers. But I think we find out from this message that his mother knew all along what he was doing. And that's why, as he was meeting all these people with the name Black, they were so friendly to him and kind of expected him to come, because he had actually reached out to them and said, hey, my kid is, has this crazy thing that he's doing, and he may reach out to you one day. So, but then at this point, so this is like months after he met her, and he finds out that he had left a message. So he goes back and they talk, and he's like, my former husband, who was, with her at the time that they first met, may have something useful to tell you about this key. So then he goes to, her former husband, has this conversation with him. And what he finds out is that this guy's father passed away not too long ago, and he had this clearance sale, and he just sold everything, all of his possessions, which included the vase, which he sold to Oscar's father because he thought it was, kind of a nice looking vase, and he was actually going to give it as a gift to his wife. And the key just happened to be in the vase. Now the key apparently was opened up some like a safe deposit box or something in a bank, and apparently it had all these letters that he had written to him and to other people in his life. And he really wanted he really wanted to find that key so that he could acquire the letters that he had written. And so that's where we actually find out what the key was all about. And Oscar is actually kind of disappointed when this is all revealed, because he thought the key actually had something to do with his dad and had some significance, but really wasn't about his dad. It was about this stranger. And and so a lot of this journey of him meeting all these different people, it was a way for him to maintain some kind of connection to his father and still have him be part of his life so that he doesn't forget him. And then now that this whole thing happened, he was in some ways depressed, because that connection, the story came to an end. He knew what the key was about. There's another story in this book, storyline, let's say, where we learn about the backstory of Oscar's grandparents, his father's parents. His grandmother is part of the story. Like, he has conversations with Oscar. She lives across the street, and they talk to each other through a walkie-talkie and all that. But we find out that his grandfather, who's a weird guy, like he lost the ability to speak when he was much younger. He just started losing words, and eventually he had no words left. And he writes the word yes on one of his hands and the word no on another. Like, he tattoos it so that when people talk to him, he can just point to yes or no, so it's easy for him to communicate. So he has this He's kind of an eccentric character, but he marries his grandmother, Oscar's grandmother, under the condition that they'll never have a kid. She'll never get pregnant. And at some point, his wife wanted to have a kid, and she does end up getting pregnant. And when he finds out, he just leaves and just goes to Germany and abandons her, which was just kind of weird. Like, it wasn't clear to me why he didn't want to have a kid. But then when he finds out about 9/11 and that his kid was actually killed on 9/11, a kid that he never met, he was a 40-year-old man, he never met him. He actually comes back to New York and tries to reconnect with his wife, who's Oscar's grandmother, and he also starts developing a relationship with Oscar, even though Oscar doesn't actually know that it's his grandfather. And they sort of make this arrangement that they're going to go to the gravesite of his father. And what they do is, Oscar's father had written all these, Oscar's grandfather had written all these letters to his son throughout the years, and he has them in a suitcase, and he ends up putting all these letters, basically puts the suitcase in the coffin of his son, Oscar's dad, which was an empty coffin because they never actually found the body. And that's sort of how the story comes to an end. So the story is very emotional. I mean, obviously it's about a tragic event, which we all kind of know about. If you're of a certain age, you all know about 9/11. It was a pretty good story. I mean, I really thought the character of Oscar is kind of, like I said earlier in the video, like he reminds me a lot of Holden Caulfield. He's quirky. He has a lot of funny ideas and interesting ideas. He's kind of like, if you've ever gone to Reddit, there's a subreddit called Shower Thoughts, which is like a collection of quirky observations and ideas, and the book is like filled with them. So the book has a lot more like ideas expressed and funny, quirky thoughts than, that seems to be more a large part of the book rather than like this complex storyline. So a lot of the book is just Oscar stream of consciousness. So if you like that kind of stuff, like quirky observations and things like that, you may very well enjoy the story. If not, if you don't like reading, if for example, if you're not a fan of The Catcher in the Rye, you may not like this book. Because if you don't like that neurotic narrator narrating a story, it may not be for you. But I thought it was pretty good. The storyline of his grandparents, which is sort of like every other chapter, there's some background about his grandparents. Sometimes it would be from the point of view of the grandmother. Sometimes it'd be from the point of view of the grandfather. I didn't find that part of the story as engaging for whatever reason. I wasn't that interested in their story. I found the Oscar stuff where he's, meeting all the characters with the last name of Black. I found that to be more entertaining, let's say. But it wasn't terrible or anything. It just was like I don't know. I guess it was just like a subplot that I didn't quite see the importance of it. Like I could see the book without that, and they focus more on just the story of Oscar. But I mean, look, maybe for the people that have read the book, maybe I'm missing something, and you can, give your thoughts in the comments. Like maybe you enjoy that part of the book more than I did. And another like quick comment I'll make, a quirky like grammatical thing about this book was that whenever he writes dialogue, usually when you have dialogue with different characters talking to each other, each character's dialogue is in a different paragraph. So that's clear, like, hey, now Oscar's talking, hey, now his mother is talking, hey, now Oscar's talking. And anyways, it's more obvious who's speaking when. In this particular book, he just wrote all of the quotations in one, he would just write them out in one paragraph, and sometimes it's hard to understand like who was speaking when. It's not a big deal, but I just thought it was funny. Like if you read this book, you will notice that. I mean, if you've read enough books, the common convention is for quotations to be in their own paragraph from a specific character. But in this book, he deviates from that, which I didn't see what the purpose of that was. So anyways, those are some of my thoughts on the book. I would say, look, it kind of reminded me of 9/11 too, and that whole event, which, sometimes you forget about it. I mean, it's already been almost 20 years, and I found myself like watching some YouTube clips of 9/11 afterwards. There was one in particular of these kids at NYU that were in an apartment, and they started filming as one of the buildings was on fire or smoke was coming out, and then they actually were able to film the airplane going into the second building, and they just went insane. Like they were just in a state of total panic, and it was just very interesting to see that. And then they screamed again when the building started to collapse. So it just reminded me of just how insane this event was. Like it was just unimaginable watching it. And so yeah, it just brought back some memories of that. So and also kind of reminded me of me going to New York last year to check out the 9/11 memorial, which is definitely something you should check out if you've never been to that. It's a pretty moving thing to witness. And so yeah, I mean, it's a book that kind of reminds you of this really major event in American history. And if you're of a certain age, you probably have some memories of it, and it kind of brings some of those memories back into the forefront. So I would give it like a 3.5 stars. I thought it was pretty good, but I guess because of didn't like the backstory of the grandparents as much, and also just some of the weird grammatical things. Like maybe I'll detract a little bit for those reasons. But overall, I would still recommend it. If you want to kind of remember what it was like to be in New York around 9/11, what that would have been like, or if you're into these kind of quirky, neurotic kid type archetypes, characters, like the Holden Caulfield types, that's another thing, reason why you might like the book. So, well, let me know, if you've read the book. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you guys think of the movie. I haven't seen the movie. Would you recommend the movie? And if you like the video, just give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll be doing more and more of these videos as I go. I think the next one I'll probably do is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. That's the next book I'm planning to read, which is a really short book, so I think I'll probably be able to read it pretty quickly. So anyway, stay tuned for more content, and have a great day.